It would be another thing to correctly construe the four forms of nihilism that Nietzsche um, puts forward, if there are only four. Um, but just on the simple point, I'm inclined to say this point, the general point that um, the mind construes what it's dealing with in a way that makes it impossible to um, distinguish uh, specific objects in a totally fair way. I think it's so far-reaching. So, like for instance, take uh, a body part or something, a foot, let's say, and then say there's some little hairs on the toes or whatever. But we just speak of a foot, and then we could distinguish the parts. But why is that any different from any object that we take out of its place in an environment, trees or grass or whatever? We'd say that we talk a lot about giving the example of a tree, as though trees often appeared in a um, white box museum, totally apart from the way we usually come across them. We do come across them in nurseries or in certain situations, landscaping as being uprooted and then isolated. In the case of the art exhibit, that would be a tree as a work of art and then used in a certain way, and then we could again understand it as part of the environment, just like we could understand hair on a toe as part of the foot. Um, these things have such the forms of understanding. Um, it requires a certain faith to then say, oh, the most common way of understanding it is the true foundation for building up science. It doesn't really make sense. Any science picks out certain problems and then says, let's focus on this, and then that gets passed on generationally through the departments or the institutions that practice it, trained into the next generation, and the equipment, the material proficiencies go along with also is intergenerationally modified. Just think of the um, microscopes of the 17th century or so. I think it's always been my theory. I don't. It's not. I don't. There's maybe it can't be really confirmed, but it seems plausible that the reason why people stopped talking a lot about germs is because sufficient number of people had looked through microscopes, especially during, I think, the 17th century, that the educated classes all stopped believing in witchcraft, and then you could see exactly when the last big witchcraft trials, which were um, provoked by common people who hadn't looked through microscopes. But then you say, now we have this view of what reality is that's especially focused on a certain vision of what medicine is about, which then comes into conflict with other visions, and in certain sense, and then it catches on because there's some respects where it seems to be immediately cogent and efficacious, and yes, we should look at the bacteria rather than something else. But then all kinds of other issues come in, whether it should be totally generalized, whether, as doctors used to do, we should say that each disease is as individual as the person that it afflicts, and the generic way of doing understanding pathogens and disease then gets a pushback with this all this COVID stuff, for instance. Of course, that has a number of dimensions, but then what doesn't? So it's always like this. So I think I would say I can't see how to. I don't see why we're villainizing Nietzsche, as it were, as, oh, Nietzsche's so negative. He's just pointing out um, something which is unavoidable, but from within that we can ask, what can we do with that? I think when you have an unavoidable problem like that, the way to deal with it is to face up with it rather than to suppress it, and then later you have to operate some kind of analysis on the political parties which have, keep repeating things which ignore um, the basic pressure of these ideas. Ideas which, again, however, can never quite be proved and which are not exactly true, so that even those who have thought through them the most can always say, well, yes, stupidity has something to say for itself in a certain way, and then, yeah, you get in a lot of trouble.